Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
The accents of prestige in car owners are steadily shifting towards SUVs, some models of which are valued higher than the notorious Mercedes and BMW. It is understandable. A solid-looking car, moreover, perfectly adapted for our roads, which a person from abroad is unlikely to distinguish from off-road. But off-road vehicles have disadvantages, especially those that cannot boast of non-disconnectable four-wheel drive. However, the front axle remains loaded when driving on the highway. This applies to the axles, and the cart-in shaft, and the gearbox, and the transfer case. All of them rotate idly, because they are rigidly connected with the front wheels. This increases the wear of the above-mentioned units, and leads to a noticeable increase in fuel consumption. This problem is designed to solve the HUB, which is officially called a clutch. What is the purpose of an off-roader's hub? It turns out that for rear-wheel drive vehicles, which SUVs become when you disconnect all-wheel drive, there is a fairly simple and elegant solution to disconnecting the wheels from other parts of the drivetrain. This is the answer to the question of what are HABs on an SUV. Technically, it is not so difficult to realize such a function. Indeed, such attempts were made quite a long time ago. In particular, before the Second World War, it could be done manually, using an ordinary wrench. Of course, it was inconvenient, so the search for ways to more easily disconnect the front axle continued by many manufacturers of four-wheel drive cars, most of which by that time was concentrated in the ocean. And in 1948, a freewheel clutch designed by famous innovator and inventor Albert Warren appeared, which made it possible to give a second life to Army Jeeps written off after the end of military operations. When using such a device, no tools were required. All that was needed was to turn the clutch cover in the desired direction to disengage, or actuate the overrunning eccentrics. Not surprisingly, this inexpensive, technically uncomplicated, and quite reliable device was soon adopted by many automakers. In addition to American companies, Jeep, Ford, Chevrolet, Japanese car companies, Toyota, Nissan, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, and later Korean, as well as automakers from the Old World, were interested in the invention. Classification of HABs. In English, this word has several meanings, one of which is hub, and it is this meaning that has come to be commonly used for the freewheel clutch, which can be disengaged along with the four-wheel drive when traveling on highways that do not require increased torque. However, despite the simplicity of the idea, many ways of its realization have been invented. But currently, the most common are three types of hubs: manual on-off, automatic, using the vacuum method of switching on. Let's consider the principle of operation of each of the listed HABs, their main advantages and available disadvantages. Manual HABs structurally, these are the simplest clutches, so they are said to be the most reliable. Here, the blocking of the hub is carried out by means of a gear that connects the wheel to the hub. The gear is engaged, the front axle is loaded, out of engagement. The front wheels rotate exclusively on the bearings, without transmitting forces to the half axle and further down the chain. By engaging the manual HUB, you have a 100% guarantee that the front axle will not disengage, regardless of external conditions. When going up a hill, you can rest assured that if the engine fails, the front axle will not be disengaged as it is with other types of hubs. Despite the reliability, manual clutches are not practically installed on serial cars nowadays, but you can equip your off-road vehicle with such a device yourself. This procedure is not much more complicated than dismantling a wheel. The most famous manufacturers of HABs with manual shifting are Brazilian company AVM and American Warn, although such clutches are made in South Korea, Russia, and Ukraine. It is clear that American HABs are of the highest quality, but they also cost much more expensive than analogs, although the principle of operation of all such devices is practically the same. Recently, manual freewheel clutches are becoming more and more difficult to buy, as most manufacturers prefer to produce automatic HABs, which are much more popular. The main reason for this user bias is the main disadvantage of manual devices. To activate/deactivate them, you have to stop the car, get out of it, and manually put the clutch into engagement if you are going to drive off-road, or do the reverse operation when driving on the highway. There are two inscriptions on the hubs supplied from abroad: lock and free. The first indicates a rigid engagement of the wheel with the hub, and only when the clutch is set in this mode can four-wheel drive be engaged. If there is a movement on the road with a hard surface, when the all-wheel drive is not necessary, it is turned off, and to reduce the load on the differentials, move the clutch to the free position. In the latter case, after a long off-road drive, the HAB can get very hot, so it is necessary to switch it with gloves or using a special key. Some manufacturers include it in the delivery set. Read also, popular options for washing the car radiator with your own hands. As we have already written above, the principle of operation of manual clutches is the use of a spline connection. One of the gears is rigidly fixed on the axle, the other, movable, on the hub. Turning the hub switch to the lock position moves the movable spline bushing toward the inner fixed gear by means of a powerful spring, bringing the pair into engagement. Turning the switch to the free position does the opposite. As you can see, the device is really very simple and therefore very reliable. You are more likely to have to replace the hub than the clutch during the operation of the car. The difference between the products from the above manufacturers is in the materials of manufacture and features of the realization of the basic principle. In particular, the Ukrainian HABs have two springs acting on cylindrical keys, while clutches from other manufacturers use one spring. Automatic HABs. The vast majority of off-road vehicles with a freewheel drive clutch are equipped with such devices. The principle of operation of automatic HABs is that when the front drive is engaged, the torque starts to be transmitted to the front cardan. This moment is caught by automatic clutches by the beginning of the rotation of the joints, which is a signal for locking the clutch. The reverse operation is carried out after switching off the front drive. And although here it is not necessary to leave the car and by hand to withdraw the gears from the meshing, to turn off the clutch will require a number of non-standard actions: stop the SUV, disengage the transmission, engage reverse gear, and drive a few meters, 3 to 5. If you simply disengage the front axle, the front PTO will disengage from the rear, but the front axle will continue to rotate, driven by the wheels to which it is connected. The change in direction is just what is needed for the automation to recognize that the spindles have started to rotate in the opposite direction. The automatic operation of the hub is its main and perhaps only serious advantage. And now about disadvantages. This design does not protect some parts from abrasion when driving in rear-wheel drive, for example. In Kia Sportage SUVs, the clutch engagement ring made of plastic and the three-spoke ring made of aluminum wear out quite quickly. As a result, at one point, when you try to engage all-wheel drive, you will fail because the hub simply does not have enough free travel to engage between the wheel and the pinion. The automatic clutch is unable to provide reliable lockup. If you can't climb a steep hill, for example, when you reverse the SUV in neutral, the CAB will disengage. To turn it on, you'll need to reverse direction. But in some cases, you simply won't be able to do this. For example, if you rolled on an off-road section with mud or clay, and to turn on the hub you will need to drive forward a few meters. Read also, what is a motor hour and why use this parameter? However, those drivers who have already tried driving on an automatic clutch are unlikely to want to change it to a manual device, despite its absolute reliability. After all, hub disconnections are not frequent, and it is not a good idea to get out of the SUV for this purpose, especially in bad weather. Vacuum couplings. These devices are considered to be the most technically advanced varieties of automatic hubs. Here, their activation is ensured by electronics, reacting to the inclusion of four-wheel drive. In the latter case, a vacuum pump is activated. Using the vacuum created in the inlet manifold, it sucks air through a system of pipes from the clutch, which is the reason for the gear to engage and rigid blocking of the wheel with the pinion. If the four-wheel drive is disengaged, the vacuum pump forces air into the line, acting on the moving pinion in the opposite direction and taking it out of mesh. Thus, the principle of operation of the vacuum hub eliminates the need to change the direction of travel to disengage the clutch. Everything happens automatically. But there are a number of disadvantages here as well. First, it is a significantly higher cost of such HABs. Secondly, their independent installation is rather complicated, as it will require changes in the operation of many other units. Thirdly, the reliability of such devices is even less than that of conventional automatic couplings, since the operation of the vacuum CAB depends on the tightness of the corresponding pipelines and glands. As they wear out, dirt, water starts to get into the line, vacuum pressure gradually drops, and at one not very beautiful moment you simply will not be able to turn on, off the clutch. That is, now you will have to regularly monitor the condition of pipelines and glands, not allowing loss of tightness. Most likely, the combination of these three disadvantages and became the reason for the low demand for vacuum hubs. Pros and cons of the use of freewheeling clutches. Many drivers of off-road vehicles do not quite realize why hubs are needed at all. Therefore, let's dwell more on the main advantages and disadvantages of these devices. In the absence of a freewheel clutch, disconnecting. The four-wheel drive does not mean that the front axle will not rotate, but it transmits motion to the cardan and the gearbox, which, in turn, makes the gears of the transfer case rotate and at idle. In other words, absence of hub leads to reduction of transmission, first of all, in power unit life, the possibility of complete disconnection of the hub from the spruces allows to improve the acceleration ability of the SUV, at the same time significantly reduces friction when the car is rolling. According to some calculations, hubs can save up to 1 liter of fuel for every 100 kilometers of travel. There are obvious design flaws in these devices, which are still technically impossible to eliminate. We're talking about the fact that in some situations, you won't be able to engage four-wheel drive when driving off the tarmac onto a dirt road, when the SUV goes over a fairly high curb, if during driving on the highway dry areas alternate with snowy ones. So, you will have to decide whether you need a hub or not, having weighed all the above-mentioned pros and cons. But if you are sure that you need a freewheel clutch for your vehicle, you will have to solve another dilemma. What kind of device to prefer, manual, automatic, or vacuum? However, the specific model of the SUV also plays a role. Not all of them are produced for a certain type of hubs. Still, the main factor determining the choice is the operating conditions of the vehicle. If you live in a rural area and off-road for you is the main way of transportation, it is better to give preference to manual clutches. For a city dweller who rarely travels outside the metropolis, the best choice will be an automatic clutch. In conclusion, optimizing hubs on off-road vehicles is essential for minimizing the load and enhancing overall performance. By focusing on lightweight materials, efficient designs, and proper maintenance, we can significantly reduce strain on the vehicle, improve fuel efficiency, and extend its lifespan. As off-road enthusiasts, understanding these principles not only enhances our driving experience, but also contributes to the longevity and reliability of our vehicles. Thank you for watching, and be sure to apply these insights on your next adventure.